Hi, my name is Lindsay Licari, and this is part one of Nevada judicial corruption and the abuse that I've suffered now for 4 years due to a marriage and mortgage fraud. And I'm sharing this because I know I am not the only victim of a corrupt judicial system. And what I have been through in the last 4 years is unspeakable and almost even unbelievable if you haven't gone through it. So I'm hoping that I can enter the next step of my healing process by telling the true story, the whole story about what has happened to me in the last 4 years, and in hopes that it can help somebody else, and in hopes that the social injustice and the violation of my civil rights will inspire somebody who has the power to do something to act, because the corruption has become out of control. It's not even being hidden anymore. The racism, the social inequalities. And I hope by me sharing my story that it changes something, or at least leaves a record of what has been done, because a lot of times it's able to be erased by the judicial system. It's able to be erased by corrupt lawyers and police departments. And I'm hoping that I'm able to leave a record of what happened to me, and hopefully this doesn't happen to anybody else. I want to start from after my son, because this has absolutely nothing to do with Aiden or Aiden's foundation. That's just who the attacks are on. So as wonderful as my son was, I don't want him part of the ugliness that my life was thrown into the moment he passed away. So I'm going to start with part one and start with who's Bobby Antee? How did he come into my life? And how did we even get into the point where we were married 2 weeks after my son's death? So I met Bobby Antee in high school. We had a short relationship in high school, a summer thing, and I didn't see him again for years. And we met up again in college and we hung out, and then again we didn't see each other for years. And that's pretty much how it went for the next 18 years. When Aiden became terminal and I took my plea to the streets to try to get a doctor to help my son, was when Bobby Antee saw me on TV, learned about Aiden's story, and began reaching out to me. Prior to this, he never came to a hospital. He never tried to help Aiden. He knew nothing about me and my son anymore. So it was pretty much a stranger from high school. So when he approached me after seeing me on the news, he wanted to help with alternative medicine. And he had a degree in health medicine and sports medicine or something like that. And I felt like, well, wow, if he has any knowledge, and, I've always trusted him in the past, well, why not let him help? So he showed up basically a week before my son passed away and was trying to give suggestions as to different natural things to help Aiden. And then on the day my son passed away, he happened to be at my house. So me and Bobby Antee never had a relationship. We were just friends from high school, and I was actually in a relationship with somebody else that I had been in a relationship with for 2 years, who supported me and Aiden through the entire process and was a good person. And we happened to struggle towards the end where Aiden began to be terminal, and we decided to break up maybe in August of 2017, but we were still hanging out. We were still friends. And October 31st, he came over and did pumpkins with Aiden. And, we were trying to survive a relationship through me watching my son suffer. And so Bobby was never part of any of this. So on the day Aiden passed away, he happened to be at my house, and I wanted to do everything to save my son. So I went in the ambulance with my son, and he drove my car and Aiden's siblings to the hospital. Again, I never asked him to come. I never asked him to do any of this. He was just there and happened to do these things. So when we got to the hospital and we lost Aiden, I then stayed in a room with Aiden for hours holding my son. And the doctors let people in. So there was, I couldn't even tell you right now how many people were there and who was there. But I remember Bobby being there. And after hours of being in this room, I walk out and I see my boyfriend at the time standing out there. And he's trying to talk to me, but I'm, trying to get Aiden out of the hospital and into the car to go to the mortuary, which for any parent, imagine that process. So I walk my son out, and, everybody that's in that room follows us out, and they put my son in this car, and I have no idea where he's going, and he's just passed away, and I collapse. And when I fall on the floor, my boyfriend at the time comes up to me, and here comes Bobby running to me too. Bobby then helps me up, and my boyfriend at the time is like, I can't take this anymore, and he leaves. So now my son just passed away. This guy that I cared about this whole time and fought with this whole time walked away from me at the hospital. And now this guy had my car and was driving me home. So we get in the car and we drive home, and everybody now that was at the service is gone. Everybody that surrounded me, hundreds of people, were all gone. And we're not service at the hospital. And he asked, do you want me to stay? And naturally, I didn't want to be alone. So I said, sure, go ahead and stay. So Bobby Antee stays the night, and he never leaves. And my boyfriend at the time was so hurt by what he thought was happening, didn't even call me. So I was so hurt that how could we go through all of this and I lose my son? And in my perspective, you waited to get off work to come, and then after he passes away, you don't even call. So I'm completely hurt and broken by the loss of my son and how I see things transpiring around me, and the greed of different people now overwhelming me. And I think, well, here's this guy, we've known each other for a long time, and he wants to help me, and he wants to support me through this. And that's what I thought. So at that point, I wanted to feel anything but pain. So that is how it even started, the relationship. It was never, that we dated or anything like that. Bobby Antee saw an opportunity where I was broken and I was vulnerable and I was hurt. And he pretended to be the person that was going to come and support me. So he didn't know Aiden. He didn't care about Aiden. He didn't care about me. And he didn't know what my work was all about. All he knows was I raised quite a bit of money, and I used to be very fond of him, and he could try to convince me now that we could have this great life together. So days after the loss of my son, Bobby Antee is pretty much the only person that's around. And he begins talking to me about protecting the money that Aiden raised. And at this time, I could care less about it. I was trying to spend every cent that my son raised on my son in his celebration of life. And that's what I was planning, Aiden's celebration. And, it was a viral story. So I was doing a lot of news interviews, and I was traveling. And those were the things that I was focused on. And I wanted to build this great foundation and legacy for Aiden. So Bobby, on the other hand, was trying to convince me that I needed to make sure that I was never going to be homeless again, and that Aiden would want me to have somewhere to live that was my own, and it couldn't be taken away. And I explained to him, I'm not in a position to buy a house. I just fought with my son for years. I gave everything to my son. I can't buy a house no matter how much money I have right now. So he then explains, well, I can help you buy a house. And he's like, that will be a way to protect your money. So I tell him, there's no way I would buy a house in your name if we're not married, because then I wouldn't have rights to this house. So the whole reason we decided to get married so quickly after my son's death was to ensure that I protected the money that my son raised and that I would be on this house. That was the only reason. So on, I believe, November 25th, Aiden passed on November 3rd. On November 25th, we went to the courthouse and got married. And after we got married, I then selected the realtor, Linda Na, and she was referred to me by somebody I didn't know that well on social media. They just said they knew a realtor. So I retained her, and I explained to Linda Na Purdue that we just got married so that I would be on the title of the house and that I was not going to be on the loan, but I was only going to help with the purchase of the home as long as we were both on it as a married couple. So she agreed to this. And at the time, you know, Bobby seemed to be supportive. Bobby seemed to care about me and my son. And that lasted for about a couple weeks. And the moment we started buying the house and going through that process, our friendship completely started falling apart. So I would be in the room crying. It's only, you know, days and weeks after I lost my son, and he would completely ignore me. He wouldn't even come in there. And my mom would then come, and he would tell her she doesn't get up, she doesn't cook, she doesn't do anything. So it was just like losing Aiden was just another day to him. But he didn't know him. So how could I expect him to care about him? So this immediately started bringing a gap between us. So after selecting the realtor, we started looking for this house, and I had different things that I wanted. So I wanted it to be cheap enough. I wanted, you know, just different things that was on my list. So I would tell these things to the realtor and to Bobby, and they would just completely ignore me and start looking at houses in Southwest when I asked to look in Northwest. So I started feeling completely discounted. And they also weren't showing me any paperwork. They were showing me nothing and just going on with this process. I wasn't talking to lenders. I wasn't talking to anybody at the title company. Only person I ever talked to was Linda Na. So we start this process, and Bobby just moved into my house. So, you know, a lot of the communications he's doing from my house on my computer, from my emails. So they then try to portray that, no, I was on these emails going back and forth with all of them. And again, wasn't true. And when Bobby, I'm gonna back up a little bit. So when Bobby came to stay at my house, and he decided to stay, and we decided that we were going to get married, I had cash in my safe. So I had 26,000 cash in my safe, and I was going to go put it in the bank. So when I took this money out of my safe, which was a horrible decision at the time, but I'm thinking that this is my friend. I don't need to hide anything from them. And if we're going to take this step of marriage, we're supposed to be working as a team. So I take out this $26,000, and I'm going to put it back in my personal account. And he explains to me that he has another account, a Goldman Sachs account, and it bears a high interest rate. And he already has $15,000 of his own money in there. So he shows it to me, and I look at it, and he's right. It's a higher interest rate. So prior to even marrying him, I give him this $26,000 cash, which he admits if you watch the court tapes, and he puts it in his account. This was supposed to simply be there to grow interest. It wasn't a joint account. It wasn't a gift to him. It was simply supposed to be there to accumulate interest. So we're buying this house, and none of this loan paperwork is coming to me. All he's telling me is addresses to go look at a house, and then when we finally select one, then we start the financing process. So when we're going through this process, I then asked Linda Na, you know, show me what's being paid off and what's not being paid off, because I have no idea what anybody's doing here. And I have this all in text messages. And she then tells me I'm not allowed to talk to an underwriter, that she is the liaison between everybody, and that She doesn't give me any paperwork. She doesn't tell me what's being paid off. She doesn't say anything at all. So I begin to get frustrated because Bobby is also not telling me anything. So they also, during this process, once we selected the house, start asking me to sign gift letters. And the first gift letter was for the deposit, which was supposed to go fully towards the deposit of the house. The second gift letter was for a car paid off prior to even marrying Bobby, because that was the only debt he told me he had to pay off to qualify for a house. Otherwise, I would have just paid off my own debts and bought my own house when I was ready. So I never agreed to paying off thousands of dollars of Bobby's debts, but I'll explain to you how they did it. So the last gift letter was for the earnest deposit. So when I went down, left the earnest deposit, I wrote it from my personal account with the belief that we would both be on the title of this home. And at that time, I was still on board with buying this home. So after asking them for more documentations during the process, and the attitude of Bobby Antee completely changing towards me, my work no longer mattered. I didn't matter. It was a 24-hour thing about getting this house, buying this house, buying this house. And I began to tell him in text messages that I provided to the courts in 2018, I don't trust you. And everybody is trying to take advantage of me at this point. So I'm not signing any more gift letters. These aren't gifts. And I then tell him to sign a letter of agreement. So when I ask him to sign the letter of agreement, I have no idea that he's at this closing, because I canceled the purchase on the 15th of 2018 of January. And from that day, I was supposed to be going to Washington, D.C. to see the little girl. So I never talked to Bobby or Linda for the next 2 days when they began to conspire to cut me out of this purchase and continue anyways. So on January 17th, Bobby finally gets a hold of me and gets me to respond to him, and is telling me they need another gift letter. Once you send another gift letter, then you'll be able to come down to the title company, look over all the documents, and they'll show you everything that's been paid off. And then you decide if you want to go through with it. And if you don't, it's fine. We'll get an apartment. And I sent all these text messages to Rainy Hughes in 2018. So at that point, I draft a letter of agreement and I make him sign before I sign the duplicate gift letter. It was not a quitclaim deed. They never spoke of that, which Bobby admits that nobody ever told me that. So they want me to sign this duplicate gift letter, and I make him sign the letter of agreement that says, in the event of divorce, that all this money is returned to me because these are not gifts and I'm not buying you a house. And again, when I signed the duplicate gift letter, we were still supposed to be on the house, and I was supposed to have an opportunity to go down and make a choice. So I signed this duplicate gift letter. We send it back. He never ever tells me that he was at a closing. He then comes to my office, and we had been arguing all day now on the 17th about him being honest, about me not wanting to buy this house, about his ex-girlfriend, Veronica Yepes, and the fact that he never even told her he got married. So it was very clear that Bobby saw an opportunity and I was vulnerable, and he took that opportunity. So then meeting Linda Na gave him even more of an opportunity, because now she was willing to help him commit fraud, even though I was not there, and she clearly knew I no longer wanted the home. So on January 17th, they all attended a closing at National Title Company, and it was Bobby Antee, Linda Na with ERA Brokers, Nikki Sakakis-Bott with National Title Company, Melissa Parker with One Realty Group, and Vache and Drew Levy with Valley West Mortgage. I was not there. Bobby admitted I was not there, and that nobody ever told me I would not be on this title of the house. At this closing, the escrow agent, Nikki Sakakis-Bott, forged my name to the quitclaim deed so that they could all collect their commission. So everybody benefited there. Bobby got his life paid off because they were allowing him to pay off debts without my knowledge. So he was using the $26,000 that was my savings to pay off his debts and qualify him for the house. And he did all of this within 30 days. And then they, at closing, out of the $65,000 deposit, they then paid off $8,000 of Bobby Antee's student loans. So everybody benefited. Bobby got his whole life paid off and a new house in his name. Linda Na got commission, Melissa Parker got commission, Valley West Mortgage got commission, and Nikki Secaucus Spot got commission. And she also collected notary fees, which is very clear on the CD. And then her neighbor, Melanie Traynor, came and fraudulently conveyed all the rest of the documents into Bobby Antee's name. So when Bobby Antee came home with the keys, I was still in the apartment that I was in, that he moved in with me. And he came back with keys to his house. And I was infuriated. I had no idea how they closed on the house. I never signed any paperwork on the house. I never told them that I wanted to buy it again. They just did it. And from that point on, everything I owned, everything my son raised, had now been put in Bobby Antee's name. And I asked for annulment the next day. I had an email, I sent it to him, and I told him I want an annulment. So you don't buy a house on January 17th, quick claim it to somebody, and then on the 18th ask for an annulment. It doesn't make any sense. So he then refuses to cancel the purchase. He refuses to return any of the money they stole out of my account, and he refuses to sign annulment paperwork. And this is on January 18th. So my son has been gone maybe 2 months. So I didn't spent from November to January planning a Christmas party for kids. I planned a wedding. I then planned a celebration of life for my son. I attended 2 other funeral services for children within this 2-month span. And then had the pressure from Bobby Antee harassing me to buy this house and buy this house. And I continued to tell him it wasn't what I wanted. And because of the fraudulent actions of Linda Na and Nikki Secaucus Spot, he was able to close on the house without me there and with all of my money with no gift letters. So when I found out and I asked for annulment, I had no idea I wasn't on the house. I thought they closed and didn't ask me if I wanted to close. So at that point, I didn't know what to do. I've never bought a house. I've never been married. I'm trying to learn how to run a foundation. I'm trying to do all these things. I had no idea what to do. So I left. I left the house and I never went to the house. I went to my mom's house. So when we moved out of the apartment, I went to my mom's house and I stayed at my mom's house. In the meantime, Bobby began moving his friends in. So he now had all control of my assets. He moved his friends into this house. And I never liked this realtor, Linda Na, so I never spoke to her again. So I had no idea what recourse I had. So I fight back and forth with Bobby Antee for weeks and months. And finally, after 6 months of abuse, so I didn't know I wasn't on the house. So when I finally did go back to the house after 2 weeks of being at my mom's house, all we did was fight. So I still never saw any paperwork for the house. But then I learned he wasn't on the birth certificate for his kids. So when I found that out, I'm like, how could you have no control over your own children? Your kids are 4 and 2. How could you not be on the birth certificate? And I told him how irresponsible this was. And his response to me was, you're stupid. That's why Aiden's dead. And from that moment on, this was maybe it was right after the honeymoon. And so February-ish that he told me this. And from that moment on, the marriage was over. I could not stand him. I was sleeping in separate rooms. I was at my mom's house. I would sleep in my office. Then that's when the abuse began to get worse. When he realized that I wasn't going to stay with him. And at this time, I had no idea what he was hiding from me. But it all makes sense now, because it makes sense of how he began to treat me. So he began to tell me it wasn't my house to get out, that he was going to change the locks if I didn't get a job and start contributing to this house. He then went down to where I had my office and began trying to close the office down. He would then come in the middle of the night into my office and yell at me and tell me how I'm not a businesswoman and that I just got lucky off a bunch of donations and I need to just shut down this foundation, and just so many hurtful things. And after months of this abuse and going back and forth and being at my mom's house, there was a cancer family, and they needed a place to stay. So at this point, I was just living in my office. I was barely talking to Bobby. He was in this house with his friends by himself. And I made an agreement with Bobby that I would come back to the house if he let this cancer family move in until they got on their feet. So that's how the cancer family moved into the house, and that's how I went back to the house. But soon after, the family moved in and I tried to go back, the fighting was still the same. And it was almost like he felt entitled to everything that my son did, but then wanted to destroy everything I was doing to try to keep his legacy alive. And initially, he didn't want the family there. He didn't like them, and I put all this in the court paperwork. But then maybe a month or so after the family moved in, and I had already started again staying at my mom's house, I then find out through the county assessor's website that my name was not on this house. So at that point, I was infuriated, because now I knew that he lied to me about everything, and that he never married me with any intent on loving me. It was all to defraud me, everything. So I then confront him, and this is late June, early July. I confront him and I tell him, how did you buy this house without me on this house? And this is the recording that I uploaded, and I'll upload this again to Equality and Justice. And he replies, I didn't know you weren't on the house. I had no idea you weren't on the house. I'm not trying to steal anything from you. And again, I had no idea what he paid off. I had no idea what happened at the closing. Nothing. All I knew is that this man had taken everything my son raised and put it into a house that was solely in his name, and then spent 6 months abusing me, trying to make sure I didn't find out that he had done this. So once I found out, I confronted him, and those are the recordings. I'll upload them again. And he then, at that time, is apologetic and just wants to move out, and we can just get a divorce. And it wasn't so much of a conflict. He was, admitting to things. And so the moment he finally leaves, he moves back to his mom's house where he has to pay nothing. And I am now at the house, and the cancer family finally is escorted out, which is another long story. So I can go back to that part, but the cancer family leaves, and I finally go down to the courthouse and figure out how can I just file for divorce myself. Because prior to this, there's multiple times I came to him. I first asked for annulment, and then because of the wording in the letter of agreement, it said in the event of divorce. So then I kept telling him, give me a divorce, give me a divorce. And he refused to sign these paperwork. And he would just sit in the house and act like it all belonged to him. He began taking pictures of Aiden off the wall. He began packing my stuff, putting it in the storage. And at this time, we had one car because he had sold his car to qualify for the loan, and I paid off the upside down balance to qualify him for the loan, with the agreement we would both be on the title. So he was driving my car around from the time of November to January, no, until almost June. he was driving my car. So my mom would have to come pick me up, and he would take my car, and my mom and me would drive in her car to go do all the things I needed to do. So at this point, it's hard for me to even relive telling this story over and over again. But so at this point, I go down to the courthouse and I file for divorce. And I then go down to Las Vegas Police Department and I tell them they committed fraud because I never told them they could buy this house without me on it. I told them to cancel the house. I asked him for weeks after to cancel the house. But apparently, because I'm not on the house, I now had no rights. No rights to cancel, no rights to file complaint, and no rights to do anything with this house. And now everything that was left to me was tied up in this house, with Bobby Antee having the control over all of it. So, at first he was willing to just sign divorce papers and move on. And this was before I knew about any of the fraud. I just knew something happened. I didn't know how they did it or what happened. I just knew it wasn't right. And I kept telling the police this. So I filed multiple police reports in 2018 in which all of them were simply ignored. And the police department then told me, no, this is a marital issue. You need to handle this in divorce court, which is a complete lie. Anything that has to do with the home, it's a civil issue and it's not a marital issue, especially when it's fraud. But this is how this happened. So I'm going to stop here for part 1. I'm going to upload all the evidence from part 1 so that you guys can see that everything that I am telling you is absolutely true. And the corruption in our judicial system truly hurts people. And we're not just numbers on court papers and names on court papers that in chambers you can decide to destroy our lives and create an agenda that fulfills your goals. And that's what's happened to me over the last 4 years over a marriage that lasted 60 days. And to have to be forced to be in a marriage, I'm still forced to be married today. I have no idea how long I'm going to be forced to go through this litigation and the pain that I've suffered throughout the last 4 years after the loss of my son. And if it wasn't for the faith that I have and the relationship with God that I have, I wouldn't even be surviving to tell this story. So I pray that you guys continue to tune in to what's happened to me over the last 4 years, and that you guys begin to stand with me and say that we no longer want corrupt judicial systems. We don't want to fear, as a victim of a crime, to fear going into a courtroom when that's the place where we're supposed to get the justice and the closure and the restitution and made whole for the things that have happened to us. And throughout me letting you know what has happened in my situation, you will see that they've mocked the death of my son. They've mocked my work. They don't care about me, my rights, the community I serve, or the families that I help. And this is why I'm sharing my story, because nobody should be treated the way that I have. So please tune in for part 2 of the corruption and the abuse that I've suffered through the Nevada court systems.